and welcome to the Alchemists Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn, and we are dealing with something that is like this universal technological issue happening in South Lake Tahoe right now, which is really cool because I'm in Tahoe with Emily. And the line here, it keeps making me think we're on two different videos.
I know.
But we're not.
Like, yeah, if you want to see us actually get to like hang out and interact with each other. Also, my dog, Callum.
Yeah, Callum, look up.
What are you doing?
No, you're funny.
You can just see us on YouTube.
Yeah.
Check us out over there, and you can actually like watch us do this video, which is super fun because we're actually like
almost bonk heads
I know
in the beginning of this video. Which
honestly, it's been an adventure already starting this video, so we're gonna see how it goes as we go.
We're gonna do our best. And the funny thing is, today we're talking about the Fae.
We are talking about the Fae.
We're dealing with some gremlins and technology, is what it feels like.
We are very much so. Also, I do have Fae in my house actively all the time. It's a Weston thing. My husband has a very strong Fae connection, and so they follow him around. So they're here. We got like little gnomes and like brownies and stuff. Yeah. They play with him often.
And he does nothing about it.
No, he loves them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They will hide things from it. It's the craziest thing. I've seen this happen so many times, and every time I still struggle to believe it. I'm a super spiritual person, right? But he'll be like, the most recent example was walnuts. He's like, I need the bag of walnuts. And he took everything out of the cabinet where we keep the walnuts, like piece by piece, looking at it, everything. Set it all down on the counter, and he's like, okay. And he like looked around, and he's like, this was a super fun game, but I'm really done playing. I would really like the walnuts now. And he turned back to the counter. He's like, there they are, right in the middle of the pile of everything he just did. And he does it constantly. It is all the time. And I like watch him do it. It's not like we both missed it. Sitting in front of, like within arm's reach. It's constant.
I like the way he handles it though. Like, that was fun. But come on, guys.
We're going to play next time. They're not up here in the office. They're only downstairs. But
it's very similar to M in Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. It's a bookend episode, and if you're watching the YouTube video, yes, this one does go on the bookshelf. We'll talk about it a little bit more at the end of the episode.
Right?
But
so this episode topic was actually voted on by our patrons. So thank you, patrons.
Thank you,
we really wanted you to pick this one.
This is the one we were hoping for. So.
We were really excited to talk about this. Both of us have read very Fae-related books in the past month, a couple of them. And so we wanted to talk about that. And also, like, I don't know about you, and I know this is not always super advisable. I do a lot of work with fairies as well, and I've channeled a lot of fairies. Yeah. And the whole, like, fantasy versus reality on that, we really wanted to talk through because it is it's a spiritual touchy concept. It's a very spiritually touchy concept. And I think a lot of fiction books have taken a lot of things out of context, Sarah J. Maas, and made it.
That's exactly the one I was thinking about too. So.
And have twisted it and twisted the narrative and twisted how kind of Fae sort of work. And so I think people have a very misguided idea of that. And I do also want to say, before we even just start off, we are not speaking to cultures, beliefs, or connections with the Fae. Like, I don't want to think, like, especially like the Irish people and the Scottish people, like they have such a Fae connection that we can't speak to because we're not part of that culture. We're purely talking about our experience with the Fae, which has been rather extensive, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's been consistent through our lifetimes. However, we are singular people in singular places with singular backgrounds and, you know, varying connections to, or varying like natural talent for connections to that. So there are going to be probably over 8 billion stories about how people connect with Fae. Yeah. You get 2 of them today.
And just from different cultures and across time. And I know a lot of people like to culturally appropriate like the Germanic Fae or even like the Nordic Fae. And of course, like I mentioned, the Celtic Fae and like their practices with them. And that's not what we're doing. I just want to like preface that at the start of it.
And in addition, if this for some reason doesn't resonate with how you've worked with Fae, that doesn't actually say the way you worked with Fae is wrong. Yeah. It's just saying this is how we've worked with them or how we've interacted with them. Right. So your experience may be completely unique. My hope is that in some way this is validating for any experiences you have, and if you're looking for guidance, that somehow this is useful in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's just entertaining, so be it that way as well. That's awesome too.
So one way I always like to talk about the fairy realms, just to kind of discuss that initially, if you think of our world like a Venn diagram, like if make the earth flat and like put it up, so like it's a flat circle. The fairy realms are a flat circle that intersects with our circle. So wherever it crosses over, and there's multiple points, because then if you made it a dome again, or a sphere again, you're going to get multiple points of contact.
Kind of like an astrolabe where you have the x-axis and the y-axis and the other ones.
Exactly. Yeah. So all those places where it contact, that's where a lot of the fairy myths and lore comes from, is because there was a time when they could walk on planet very seen, and they still can in some capacities. I deeply believe that. But it's not as common because obviously we've kind of pulled apart or pulled closer together a little bit, and like we kind of fluctuate like that.
Yeah, and the way I feel about it, because I've asked about this before, because one of my favorite collections that I've always had is fairies.
Yes.
So when I was a kid,
or
it was
Fae-like beings. You like Peter Pan. You like you like corgis. You like Zelda. All of that is very fairy.
I don't know what to say. Well, Peter Pan and Link from Zelda are also like non-binary icons too. So
true.
It's
very
fantastic.
True.
That was one of the ways that I was like, oh, there it is. Among those, they are very Fae-like. Shout out to Zelda fans here who are thinking about Ocarina of Time and how they call Link a fairy boy, and it's different because he's Hylian. So very particular.
But he has a fairy that saves his life on a regular basis,
and then ditches him. But anyway, I could go into Legend of Zelda stuff.
Passion.
4 days. No, but the way I've worked with it and understand it to my capacity is that they used to intersect more when we were of a mindset and sort of a collective understanding. Because you know how there's that story of, or even if you watch the first scene of Pocahontas has a vision of these strange clouds on the horizon. Can't identify that they're sails. And so they just don't see them. It's a really good
analogy for it.
So you might see things, but we will consciously, our brains will just look over things that don't make sense. And so while they may exist, it's just something that we're not processing the way we used to because we're not acknowledging the existence of it, and we don't know what to look for. And so when we see it and it confuses us, or our physiology and the inherited memory doesn't allow for it.
Understand.
I think we energetically or in some perception capacity have separated from that ability. But you can nurture it back. And I think likewise, because we're not fostering the friendship on our side, they not necessarily inclined to do it with us either. So it's like two friends that diverged on paths, and occasionally they still hang out depending on the people.
That's fair.
Yeah, but
That's fair.
I feel like it still exists. It's just we're not seeing it, and both parties are not really like building that relationship. Another thing that it reminds me of is for some reason the origin story of not Ba Sing Se, but Omashu.
Oh, yeah.
In Avatar
secret
The Last
tunnel.
Airbender. Yeah. So there are secret tunnels through the mountain, and some people will badger mole their way through. But they're still on other sides
love
of the
the
mountain.
level of nerd references we've made.
I mean,
it's been fabulous. No, I'm just saying, like, this is a specifically heavy nerd reference episode.
It really is. So, included in
agree.
bookends, you should watch Avatar The Last Airbender.
100%. Play Legend of Zelda.
Watch any version of Peter Pan that you feel inclined to watch.
And read all the books we're about to recommend. Yeah. I will also say, too, it's a really... We need to make sure, like, with the fairy world, it is just as complicated, if not more complicated than ours. There are so many more types of beings, so many more types of sentience. And I say types of sentience because it's truly types of sentience. Like, our world is in a lot of ways, a very simplified version of theirs in a huge way. At least from my talking and working with them in astral projection there. That's what I've gotten. Yeah. It's funny. That is the easiest place I've ever astral projected. I don't recommend that for beginners. Like, if you've never astral, I'm just gonna
by the
don't
way,
do that.
Don't do what I say. Don't do what I do.
Yeah. It wasn't intentional the first time it happened to me at all, and then the other times it's been like, oh, that's whenever I feel like I need to astral project, it's usually because I need to go there for whatever reason and talk to somebody or whatever. So it's happened a lot to me. Don't do it. I don't recommend it. It's not something that it was like a choice, and also you really need experience before you astral project. We can do a whole episode on it.
And you need like conscious intention because you don't want to get kind of I don't want to say stuck as in you're going to be sucked into another realm.
No.
But it kind of reminds me, and there's nothing wrong with this for those of us who have experienced this, but it does become sort of a maladaptive daydream over a period of time. And to the point of maladaptive being, you can't live your life that you're in it, because you're so distracted by longing for a life that you're not actually able to engage with as directly. So to me, that's one of the be aware of things. Like, always have something that anchors you. Go in with the intention. It's like when you go to Target, go with a grocery list. Yeah. Go there with what you're going to do. When you accomplish that, come back. You can always, do it again. As needed or required or whatever. But give yourself, you're here in this life for a purpose. And, just always be willing to live out the purpose that you have as you're engaging with all the other wonderful things in the world.
Yeah. Same thing with like shifting and other things like that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking about.
Anyway, so beside the point though, it's a really, really, really complicated world with lots more different types of sentience. And so a lot of times interacting with the Fae, I think the other reason, like you said, your brains kind of scan over things, is we have become very human-centric. We used to be really, really nature-centric, and now we're very human-centric. And that's really, really hard for us to interact with this world that is very, very nature-centric, very against human understanding of like how we function, our rules, our laws make zero sense to the Fae. Like,
and us.
I mean,
they make zero sense.
In general, it's just like, no. But truly, it's that sort of thing. For them, it's like, oh, we can break that rule. This can be altered. This can be shifted. And for us, it's a lot more concrete and tangible. So that's why I say, like, it is such a more complicated world that is so much more earth and nature centric than our space. And that's part of the reason I think we don't interact as much anymore. Can't see them as tangibly, etc., unless you like run into a fairy beast or something in the woods. Which, if you live in the woods, happens. I can tell you from personal experience. It happens quite often.
Well, I remember when I moved, I always had said, like, I need to be surrounded by trees. I need it. So, like, you know, I live in a city now, but one of my things when we were moving, and we moved under a lot of time pressure. I didn't get to see the place I was moving into. We were moving in like 2 weeks. We had to go. And so someone found a house for us, and I was like, are there trees though? And that was my one thing. I know this is an emergency, but are there trees? There are. It's wonderful. There's a whole forest that we get to walk like right up to. One of the ways that you can right here, right now, kind of feel more connected and start playing in a very safe space is just raising plants, working with plants, acknowledging plants. Try vegetarianism for a little while. One of the unexpected side effects of vegetarianism to me, like I didn't do it out of as much worldview as I did out of like nutrition desire, because you know my husband and I were going through a lot of stuff at the time, and it's like this might help, and if you're going to do it, I'm going to try it too. Why not?
It makes a big difference. 3 years later,
I'm just like, I understand so much more. And I wonder if part of it is because you are what you eat, you know, what you take in, those nutrients build the cells in your body, and then because you're kind of having that osmosis and that communication with what you're taking in, it's less blocked by certain other things like, you know, like sugars and all that stuff. Nutrition is another special interest of mine that I will not dive into too much now. If you're interested in more about like the metaphysics of nutrition, we can do that on a topic another day.
That's a great idea. We should definitely do that topic sometime. I agree though. I've been a vegetarian for more of my life than I've been not a vegetarian. I decided when I was 10 years old that I was going to be a vegetarian, and my mom was like super supportive of everything I did. So she was like, okay, sure, whatever. You can be a vegetarian. And so she immediately started learning how to cook tofu. And my mom's incredible. But I only stopped because when I was pregnant with my daughter, I needed more iron and I couldn't supplement it. So I needed to eat meat. I ate meat for not very long, 7 years, and then immediately went back to vegetarianism.
Don't miss it.
No. I do think that's a really great way to connect with nature, to be totally honest. Also, I just want to touch on this too. If you don't live in forested spaces, or if you haven't spent a lot of time in forested zones or national parks or things like that, I have copious amounts of that. We go backpacking all the time. I have since I was itty bitty. I don't remember learning how to ski. Like, we're very nature-based people. My dad's like a lifetime member of the Sierra Club. Things like that. Like, very hippie zone. The stories of like Appalachia where they're like, don't look at the trees at night. And if you hear this... Yep.
That's where I grew up.
100%. This is how that works. Out here too. Like, there's been times when my husband and I have abandoned backpacking trips because there was something that wanted us to do something that we didn't want to do out there. And we're like, we're going, we're leaving. This is how people die in the woods. And it's 100% how people die in the, I mean, also people are stupid in the woods, and also accidents happen, but there's a huge element of that.
But if something ever hits the news and you're like, why would someone be that outlandish? It might be because they just weren't discerning enough to be able to say, that's something I'm not going to do. Yeah. And again, that shows up in this too. Isn't that funny? In the book that we will talk about at the end. Right. Which, as you're noticing, is a really great source of inspiration for actual work.
It's so well researched and so channeled.
Well written.
Channeled and so...
And the characters are perfect. It's great.
It's fabulous. But yeah, so like on that element too of the more you're in nature, and I noticed this a lot when I was a horseback trail guide. I've done a lot of shit. And when I was a horse, like...
I totally get you.
It's ridiculous. When I'm like, the other day I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, okay. So I managed a pottery studio at the same time as I waited tables. And then I went straight from that and I like sold tickets for a boat, and then went straight from that to a call center. Yeah. And then I was in a call center for a while before I went and sold cars. And then I came back from selling cars. At that time I did ghostwriting selling cars on for a while at the same time, and then I came back from that, and I was a horseback trail guide while also doing ghost reading. All this time, by the way, also being a psychic professionally on the side.
Yep. Well, I like when...
And then I was an HR manager for like 5 years.
And it's the favorite thing, like when you get to say, oh yeah, back when I was a show person. And it's like, you were a show person? Yes. Or like, oh, I worked at Disney World. Things. You what? Well, yeah, but that was at this point. And like, medical billing and all this other stuff. And it's like, oh, that all sounds very disjointed. But like, tell me you're neurodivergent without telling me you're neurodivergent.
I know. I feel like my entire life has just been a series of like, I'll try it. And then if it fails, I don't get affected by it. Mm-hmm. It's just like, oh, it didn't work. And it's just moved on. And I realized like, last year, I'm like, oh, other people get affected by those failures. I totally have never gotten affected by those failures. I just keep jumping at things.
Like, that's the thing.
I just keep jumping at things.
It's not chapters in a book. It's entries in an encyclopedia. Mm-hmm. It's that's allowed to be very different.
Yeah. Anyway, side tangent on our spot.
I'll segue us back because the book that we're going to be talking about is called The Encyclopedia and actually has footnotes. And the footnotes are obviously also part of fiction, but also still really thought-provoking when it comes to things about Fae. Yeah. So it's really interesting to think about that too. And there are like tons of books that you can get that are less fiction oriented that would give you about folklore. Mm-hmm. And I do recommend if you're drawn to a certain type of Fae, research the background, the culture, the folklore, because those people who have connected and have learned will give you more to go on. It's not that your intuition is wrong. It's actually that reading sources might actually validate what you already know and then give you more to do with it.
Absolutely.
Because the worst thing about like having an intuition is like, I know this, but I don't know what to do with it. I know this, but I don't know how to, I don't have a teacher. That is where like books and sources and actually doing the research of history or academics
comes in.
Really comes in.
Absolutely. So it's worth mentioning this whole podcast episode was inspired by the Encyclopedia of Fairy, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I read and immediately texted Krista. Was like, you need to read this right now, because it's everything we've both been wanting in a fairy book, because it shows there's very human, very empathetic elements to Fae, depending upon the type of Fae. And then there's also very not. And then there's like also, it really speaks to, I hate calling them like the lesser Fae, but the smaller Fae, the more like...
The more elemental.
The more elemental Fae. And then the high Fae, which are more like what we would consider human-esque. They have more of a society, conscious. I guess is what I'm going to say. More societally, more societal Fae versus singular or like small gathering sort of Fae. And it's everything that happened in that book is stuff that is so aligned with the channeling and research that I've done.
Oh, me too.
It was like, oh, this is so validating, and it's just a beautiful story, and I love the main character.
Well, and it acknowledges all of the cultures of Fae that we're familiar with from many books already covering it, particularly Irish. But it takes place in a location that is a little bit underserved.
Oh,
and
completely.
I think that's the point of like her encyclopedia. Emily's is not this Emily, but Emily, the character in the
Emily
book.
Wilde.
Emily Wilde's encyclopedia is missing this, way out there, obscure location of Fae. And so you get to really get the full like global understanding of it. And it's also really accurate to how sort of metaphysical academia works.
It is.
As they're talking about their conferences and EcoDef is the conference there. I'm like, Norwalk?
No, it's 100%. It's very much like, it's magical realism, and it's very, it takes place in like the 1800s. I think, in that sort of zone.
It makes you think it's taking place in the 1800s, and it probably is, but it never really claims anywhere.
No, I don't. What are the dates on the journal entries?
Just the month and the day.
Is it just the month and the day?
It's 14th November and stuff like that.
So, but it feels very, there's not television.
Yeah, it feels turn of the century.
It's very turn of the century.
Turn of the 20th century. Turn of the 20th century.
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah, we're like on
lots
Main
of things
Street,
are done with letters. There's no phone calls.
Yeah. Yeah, stuff is shipped.
Yeah. So it's very much that, and it reads like a field journal. So the whole book is a field journal, which is really, really nice and refreshing, to be totally honest, to read a book that reads like a field journal. That's not sci-fi, because I feel like that's a very common sci-fi thing, but not a very common fantasy. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's really, really nice. I really appreciated that about it as well. And the level of how Emily works with the Fae in the book is so spectacular. Yeah. Because, like, she's afraid, but she does it anyway. And that is such a spirituality thing. I love it so much. It's so innately, like, what we try to instill in all of you of, like, hey, you're afraid. Do it anyway. It doesn't really matter. We're going to try it out anyway.
Yeah, and, like, do it safely anyway, even though you're afraid. But one of the things, like, and you and I have talked about this a lot. I related so deeply to just everything about Emily.
Yeah.
The way that Emily's character is written. I mean,
it's incredibly autistic. She's very autistic.
Yeah.
I don't know if the authors ever made a statement on that, but it is literally like trait after trait after trait after
even
trait.
The way, even the way she engages with other people, the way she handles social gatherings, the way she handles romance. Yeah. All of those things.
The way she's particular about things too, how things need to like fit and work, how she's blind to appearances, like blind to them. Completely. Love her. It's fabulous. And she's meticulous. Like, this is obviously her hyperfixation, and she talks about it like it's a hyperfixation too, where she's like, no, like, this is the thing that saved my life. This is the only thing I've ever focused on. Like, this is all that I do.
Well, I'm doing this not for the people involved. I'm doing it because it's going to add to my research. It just happens to save a life.
Which also you kind of get to the end of it and you're like,
you're more of a good person than you thought you
give
were.
Yourself a lot
Somebody called you callous at one point and you let that get to you, which again is how it works.
Right. And you get the impression that she's one of the only females in her field. Like, I think there's
she mentions
a couple in the footnotes, but all of them are like, oh, before she went mad or before her research got debunked or whatever it is. So you kind of get the feeling that she's a little fighting for her life in the academic sense as well, which is also incredibly validating because it feels historical in that aspect of it too, which is cool.
Yeah. So really, again, love the book, but again, the way that the other benefit of that is you get a very objective viewpoint of what's happening. Yeah. Because it's not too like emotionally attached. It's fixated. It's studious. It's studying. Yeah. But even still, you fall in love with the characters. They do have development, and it's so subtle. You notice it happening, but you're doing it with them, rather than like one chapter is this, and the next chapter suddenly this person is different, and you know that there was supposed to be a development there, but we didn't get to go through it. It just was this chapter is now filling this plot. Function.
And it's a little bit like, because she's writing after the fact, it's her journal, right? So she's like writing kind of as this happens.
The last 3 days were blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. It's also kind of, you get to feel her own surprise through her own development as well, which I think is such an authentic and organic experience for all of us. Of like, when we develop, we don't usually realize in the moment that this is my character develop moment, but then after the fact, we're thinking back and we're like, oh, that changed my perspective.
Yeah, like 2 times you get I just reread that last thing, and I might tear it up later. It's just like, yes.
Like, authentic. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Also, the secondary main character, his name is Bamblebee, and he's my favorite.
Yeah.
I love
him.
So
well done. Yeah.
Wendell Bamblebee.
I also recommend...
And he's Irish.
I recommend getting the Kindle and the audiobook.
The audiobook is so well done.
Yeah, like, however you read it. The audiobook, though, is really well done because you have the journal version of Emily's voice, which is just this and this and this and this. But then when the expressions, usually it's Wendell that she's shouting for help with, it sounds so accurate to how that would show up. Wendell! And now you're all going to get the audiobook.
It's really good. It's a really good audiobook. It's super funny because I immediately went and bought it for my bookshelf. And then Krista's out here. We went to my favorite bookshop and I was like, look, it's here. And it's naked. Yeah. I love naked hardbacks.
No sleeve.
It's just
a book cover.
It's just a naked cover.
And it feels smooth.
Anyway, beside the point.
I have it now.
So Krista now has it because we just went and got coffee. And now Krista has it the same place I bought it. Was really excited about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so circling back into some Fae stuff, which again is very much touched on in this book. Some tenets of Fae culture, Fae society that is kind of common across everything. Obviously, strong elemental connections. There's always some sort of magic that involves nature. It's not typically arbitrary magic.
Yeah, it draws on nature and a connection with nature to bring about things, which is actually very much sympathetic magic.
Yeah,
right?
It is very sympathetic magic, 100%. And it's funny because I think a lot of people view Fae magic as kind of chaos magic, and that is not the case at all. It has rules, it has dignifiers, like it has specific things. What type of Fae you are determines the magic, what level of power or hierarchy you in determines your magic in a lot of ways. Like it's a lot more complicated than that, than just like, oh, they just do chaos magic and they just make shit happen. It's like, that's false. No, that's not how that works. At least in our experience, I wouldn't call it chaos magic.
I wouldn't either. And in fact, my brain doesn't. Chaos magic is, believe it or not, one of the things to me that I'm just like, how do chaos magic? Because again, I work with astro magic, which is very sympathetic. I work with folk magic, particularly of a Christian practice. So again, very sympathetic magic. And that's always worked for me because my brain really likes making those connections of, oh, this is why that works.
Same. I mean, I do all of my ancient magic from different, like, did a lot of Grecian magic from ancient Greek culture, ancient Roman culture. We should probably interview a really integrity chaos magician at some point.
Yeah. If anybody has a recommendation of a chaos magician who has a lot of integrity in practice, we would be very open to interviewing that person.
I have spoken with a chaos magician before, and they gave a Pringle chip the energy of Moldavite and ate it. And that's chaos magic. Yeah. That in the tea.
Oh, Fae healing does a lot of chaos stuff.
I did, kind of, kind of like... It's a little bit...
I've decided it's this way now.
It's the nihilism of magic.
Yeah.
It's the nihilism of magic. It's the nothing matters, so I can do whatever I want kind of magic. Which they bear the repercussions of as well. That is a huge tenet of chaos magic. Is like, so, you're going to do whatever you want, but if it fucks it up, then it doesn't matter. It has to come back to you.
Once upon a time. All magic comes with a price.
Yes.
Chaos magic.
Chaos magic, 100%. Yeah. So that's not fairy magic.
In this case, it's usually agreements and bartering, which again is really well delineated in the book that we're talking about today, because it comes with a negotiation, or it comes with an equal exchange. Not necessarily a price that you don't know you're going to have to pay yet. Unless you're just like, I need it right now and you can decide later, which gets chaotic in and of itself because you didn't set the contract. But
it is very contract based. It is very bargain based. That's a very that type of culture. Offerings are huge. Like the fairies love offerings. If you lose something, especially if it's a shiny thing, ask for it back. And see how it happens. It works really, really well. Even if you're not super fairy connected, oftentimes that's what's going on.
And so you could actually say like the love language of working with the Fae is gift giving.
100%.
And that's one way to think about it, rather than to say I have to offer this, because I know another religious structure that is very much based on offerings, and it's not the same. So you'll notice like,
my mom took my kids to church. And they came back, and because my mom's very Catholic, and I was raised Catholic, and I love Catholicism because it gave me a love of ritual that I wouldn't have had without that upbringing. It is a ritual-based religion that believes in everything. They just don't condone everything. So that's the other thing. They don't want
everybody practicing everything, which in some cases is very smart, especially when you think about the roots of it. Like I get it. I think it doesn't translate modern as well, and we just haven't updated it.
I think so too, and I think that because it's a structured, organized religion, there's obviously issues because it's basically a corporation. But they believe that you can be possessed. They believe in magics and psychics and astrology. Like they deeply like the Catholicism is the most pagan Christian religion. Anyway, besides the point, it genuinely is. But they pass around the offering tray because they do that in mass. Like when you're in mass, they pass the plate around. I know.
Sorry.
No, that was great. I loved it. But they pass the plate around, and my kids were baffled. They were like, I don't understand. Like, that was their number one question. It wasn't about God. It was like, why do people just put money in a plate? I was like, oh, let's talk about it. Because, like, that is their offering, you know, that sort of thing.
But with the Fae, an offering might be like a hazelnut or just something that, and what it is a way of saying, I understand you. I know you like this. Here you go. Candy. So that's why it feels like a love language where you're building a relationship. When we think about astral magic, we do the same thing. You build a relationship with a planet through planetary charity. It's the same concept. And really all you're saying is, hey, I acknowledge you. I want us to have a relationship so that when you need me, I'm there for you. And when I need you, you're there for me. Whatever. Just like, Emily and I
Friendship,
do.
Yeah.
You walked into a bookstore today and were like, KristaLyn will like this. Look, book. And I was excited. So now, like, if I were
done with like 6 things.
If I were a Fae, I'd be like, I'm cleaning your shoes tonight. Like, whatever it would be.
No, that's really funny.
I have been, like, people have pointed at me and assumed Fae.
Yeah.
Many times.
Yeah. No, you have that energy.
I'm certainly flattered. Would love that. No proof of it. So
it would explain a lot of your disconnect from this particular realm, but
we'll see. I mean, my love for stars.
With it.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm just feeling very watched. So I'm just like, who's mad at me for what now? Because I deal with the planets a lot, so I don't know if they're like planet Fae or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different types.
More research required,
right? I had a point on that. It's gone. Another tenet is they do have a lot of respect for power and each other's power, and like if you have more power than someone else, like that's kind of what gets you a lot of respect, and that in a lot of ways, and it's not human style respect. it's different. They respect beings and people very differently. Locations very differently than humans do.
It kind of reminds me, there used to be a time, and in some areas of the world, I think it still exists, where you were given what you needed to do the function that you did.
Yeah.
And so, like, people who were more spiritually of service didn't have to have day jobs, because the community provided for their necessary needs so that they would be available when the community needed. Like an oracle, right? If you think
like
about the Oracle of Delphi, that
like
person,
a druid. Yeah. There was a whole society of druids. They would meet together, have conferences. That was their job. That was all they did.
And that seems as close as I can figure to our approximation of understanding that facet.
I agree with that. I will say, in my experience, the Fae can experience a very large range of emotions, of human-style emotions. I think they have even more than we do.
Yeah, I think they probably think we're simple when it comes to emotion.
I agree. I will say sometimes books will write it so they can't connect to human emotion, and that always makes me sad.
Yeah,
because they aren't that cold. It's just different.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I find is they're not willing to waste time explaining in a lot of cases. So while they get it, they're already moving on, and they're not like doing the whole like intermediate education to drag you along. Yeah. One of the things,
a bunch of neurodivergent beings.
Absolutely. It reminds me of in Ask Me Astros, one of the things that the co-host of that CV, Henriette, will do is I'll be explaining astrology, and she'll stop me and say, "Imagine I've never heard of astrology before. Now say it again." And I'm like, okay. And so I appreciate that, though, because I need to learn how to do that, because this is the world we're living in. And I do want to educate people and help them understand. That's a big passion of mine. But I think the Fae have less patience for that kind of thing.
Very much so.
Like, you meet them where they're at, they're not going to likely meet you where you're at. And that's okay.
And for the most part, they, in my experience, do have trouble lying. I don't think that they can't lie, but I do think that is something that is a very strong tenet of their culture. Like,
as someone who also has trouble lying, it's just like, why, when you could easily just not have to keep track of multiple stories, and you can just say things like they are, or just say what's necessary in the moment. Yeah. And that way you don't have to, like, I don't know, lying seems like a really interesting energetic currency that is like pennies, where they'd be preferring like gold bars.
Yeah, I just will say it because, like, there's myths, a lot of stories like, oh, fairies can never tell a lie. I don't think that's the case. I just think that they choose not to most of the time, which makes them also seem brutal to us a lot of the time, because we're like, oh, they're brutal, they're rough, they
they're blunt,
radically true.
But the thing is, of course they can, because we also give them the ability to glamour.
Yeah.
So
100%.
And again, is that lies, or is it just changing the necessary thing for that moment? So it's also,
it could be their authentic self, but they just want to look this way right now.
Exactly. And I think the idea of a glamour is really interesting to me when you think about the Fae, because I don't necessarily, I'm getting hit for some reason. There's like a thing in the back of my head being like, it's not a lie. I'm like, okay, it's not a lie, what is it?
Decoration.
What I'm seeing is like, it's what you do to get by in the circumstance. It's necessary for so it's like when you're being polite, you will wear fancy things to a fancy gathering. Or when you go to church, you wear your fine clothes. Yep. That's a glamour. We call it fashion and makeup and all of those things. And just as you have good enough reasons to wear certain clothes in certain circumstances, or cosplay, glamour.
That's very much glamour.
Right? It's not necessarily a bad thing or inauthentic. It's just what you do in that moment, because that's what the moment calls for, or what you feel in that moment.
Yeah, and that's who you are.
Yeah. And on the other side of it, masking. It's not that you're masking because...
That is also a glamour, for sure.
Sometimes we need to mask to get through a situation. It's not because we can't be our authentic selves, but in that situation, so many people need to be accommodated for that sort of a baseline is called for.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair. Yeah, I mean, do you have any standout experiences that you've had with the Fae that you want to share? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Well, the one that came to mind first was we were going to this monument in Scotland, and you had to park at the base of the mountain, and you had the option where you could drive to the top or walk to the top. And when we get in situations in magical locations like at Stonehenge, in Scotland, in Egypt, or whatever, my parents have learned to defer to me, and they'll be like, what do we need to do? And I think because I also help one of the functions that I've served in my family that I'm very grateful for is being very useful in our connection to God or the creative source, right? To distinguish it from any demiurgic kind of God function there. I'm learning more about that right now, which is fascinating. About the God of the Bible and like the different iterations and things with that culturally and academically. But anyway, I digress. Yeah. So at this time, my parents were like, well, Krista, what do we need to do? And I was like, we need to walk, but you guys need to walk ahead. The trees need to talk to me. And I went in and I just walked with the trees a little bit. I got kind of a, like, you call it a reprimand. It's just very like, this is what you need to do. And so it's not unloving and uncaring. It's, hey, you've been missing this. Just do it already. Stop wasting time. Yeah. Or stop wasting energy in that sense, because time is different. So I just walked along the trees and let them talk to me for quite a bit. Came out of it like, oh, I need to do this now. Took action on it, and a lot of things got better. It was the Wallace Monument in Scotland, by the way, for anybody who's interested in like where this happened. But yeah, I just needed to talk to the trees. When we bought my the house that I grew up in, I was about 8 years old, and I went out and I taped 2 straws to a piece of paper so I could scroll up a map. And I went out and I mapped the entire woods for some reason, because there's 18 acres of trees, and I was like, I need to know how to get around this. It was just, I don't know why. I'm not a person who does things on my own, but there was a dogwood tree. That was my dogwood tree.
And you don't like spiders and stuff, so I'm
surprised by you. I would go out into the woods on my own, and there was like, for some reason, there was the bed of a truck that was just in our woods, so I would write that down and show you where it was, where the house was. So I always knew how to get through our woods. I had mapped it out.
You're like, I know what I'm doing.
But there was also a tree stand from hunters that I had the intentions of turning into a tree house. So I did, like, it was a triangle of trees. And one of them had a tree stand, and I connected the trees with planks and then lost interest. But I would sit up on the tree stand with the tree, because I also hate being on the ground. I love trees, but I hate being on the ground, so I like climbing trees. That's how you bring those two together. And so I would just sit in the tree stand for a long time. And I don't remember like necessarily what I did, but I would just sit up there. And thinking back, it was probably one of those
bridge
moments.
To Terabithia level fairiness going on, for sure.
Yeah. So I would like journal or just sit there and talk to myself, quote unquote. Yeah. But I've always had conversations out loud with people who are not necessarily there, and not always guides or spirit guides or mediumship. It's felt very much less mediumship,
especially
more
if you're in nature. Yeah.
And I loved that. Singing, I think, also really helps connect you with the Fae.
Very much so.
Just singing random songs that are words that don't exist. That's been something that I used to do a lot.
Yep. When you're on a horse and you're in the middle of the wilderness and you're by yourself and all of a sudden something feels very scary, that is also something I used to do, is sing a lot of songs that don't exist. And it would immediately calm the horse, who could also very easily pick up on what was going on. It would calm whatever the fuck got scary, and it would also immediately connect you with like Fae energy. Big time.
Connecting with animals is another great sympathetic way to connect with Fae. Plants is one thing we've mentioned, but animals is another thing. And it reminds me of one of the things we'll be doing in Egypt next year.
Yes!
Because we're going to be, we will be appreciating the services of some camels who will be conveying us.
We will be honoring the camel services that we will be receiving. Yeah. In Krista's experiences, camels are angry.
Well, no, because they're overworked is the thing, right?
I know.
So these particular camels, I've already been to Egypt. I've ridden on the camels that we will be riding from the pyramids to the Sphinx, and I decided to connect with the camel and thank it for what must be exhausting and really annoying for it, right? Yeah. If you connect with certain animals, you will also get a very Fae-like response from them.
Yeah.
So, that's
being a horseback trail guide and loading people who've never ridden horses on to horses' backs and then making the horses walk around the wilderness.
Yeah.
They don't like it. I mean, they're fine with it. They'll do it, but it's very... They barter.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so that's like why we actually included a workshop on how to connect with animals on the day that we will be connecting with camels in our Egypt trip, which, by the way, if you're interested in going to Egypt with us next March, you can sign up by now.
It's live.
It's live.
It's live. So by now, by the time this is coming out, the trip is live. Please join us. We would love to have you come. Okay. It's going to be 100% a completely transformational journey. Both of us are incredibly excited for how everyone's going to show up and how everyone's going to leave. It's going to be very, very different, and there's so much beautiful workshops and learning combined with all of these very ancient incredible places that we're going to be in.
If you're ready to go on a trip and then come back a more actualized version of yourself, that is one of the things that Egypt does.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Big time. Big time.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited, like genuinely very, very excited about everyone who does get to go. Like the energy of the group feels incredible already. We're tuning into the future because like they haven't even signed up yet, but I'm just like, this is the group. Like this is perfect. And the things that we're doing are not the touristy, well, I mean, some of them are, but they're not. A lot of them are not the most touristy aspects.
Yeah, and it's not limited to touristy aspects because we dictate. Emily and I have dictated this tour.
Very closely.
So I always hesitate to even call it a tour because it's not going to be like that. We get to go to all the places that you would, but we are going to be doing it differently because we're not limited to, you know, the whole flag following experience.
Situation.
Yeah. Yeah, there will be more.
It's very different. And you'll meet lifelong friends.
Yeah, there's something about that trip that feels like the people on that trip are going to connect for a very long time afterwards. And you, honestly, you share such a soul transformation on trips like this. That's the idea of ancient wisdom trips, that the people there will get you and you will get them. And it gives you these people that you can talk to about that kind of stuff, even when the world goes back to mundanity.
Yeah. Same with our other trips. Like if you're coming to our Greece trip or our Ireland trip, those are charged with the same energy. Yeah. Big time. So the people you meet there will be lifelong people. Yep. That really impact you in your journey. Which is exciting. So anyway, now that we have gone through all of that, want to talk about our bookend?
Yeah. So obviously one of the things I read this month was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, written by Heather Fawcett. Was amazing. Listen to this episode again if you want to hear more about it.
It's so good. I can't recommend it enough. It was an instant 5-star. It's going on the sleeve.
Yes. Oh, it's going on the sleeve.
But I can't do it till the series is finished.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously going on my bookshelf, which is great too. Yeah. I also read Sorcery of Thorns this time, which was really, it was good. It's not going to go on the bookshelf, but I'm not sorry I read it. Yeah. I think for me, the story was really good. The world was really good. The characters needed more breathing room.
They did. It was limited to in my opinion, it's limited to the constrictions of YA. Yeah. It needs to be shorter and they need to be less mature and like things like that. And I think that was like part of its issue.
Yeah, it's definitely a very big world crammed into a box. So for the needs of it being that way, like I see why it happened that way, but I want more. And Em did just let me know that there is a novella. So it's really good. I'm going to recommend, after you read it, if you decide to read Sorcery of Thorns, I'm going to be diving into that novella because it seems to scratch the itch that I was left with. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. I'm currently reading The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. I just started that today. And, I read I started a webtoon that I highly recommend.
What one?
Castle Swimmer.
I've read a lot of that. It's so good.
I read it.
And it's a Killian and it's amazing.
Yep. I gave it to Dan. I was like, you need to read this because this I feel this. Like there's so much of this that explains things that I can't put into words. So it updates every Sunday. Well, it updates every Saturday night, but like 9 p.m. Eastern time, so I'm already asleep. But on Sunday morning, I'm just like, I get to get a new chapter. And I just love it. Yeah, so
that's a really good one. It's
highly
really,
recommend.
Really good one.
Healthy in so many ways, goes into so many things. Just read it. You'll get it. There's too much for me to like put into words.
It's definitely one of those things you can't even describe the premise, to be totally honest. Yeah. I don't know. Like webtoons are fun because you don't have to describe the premise. Yeah. Like you don't have to sell it. And you don't have to sell the premise. It's mostly based on the art. The art is
good. It covers things. All the things you're like, please don't do this trope. It doesn't. It'll lead you up to it and then give you an alternative. Yeah. And I love that too. And just the way that they handle different races of merfolk. Like the whales. Yes. I'm just going to say the whales. Anyway.
No, that's man, I haven't read that in like a year, but no, that's a good one.
It's good.
It's really good.
So there's that. Academically, I've been reading a lot of Valen's astrology stuff. I've been reading a lot of some more Abu Mashar and I don't remember the other one I'm reading right now. I'm doing a lot of mundane astrology research right now, which is fun, and length of life astrology research, which I'm going to use on this is something like I do not recommend it if you are like someone who doesn't want to know. I'm using it on people who have already lived to see how accurate it is. I'm using it on family members who have already lived their fullness to see how accurate it is. And then I am the type of person with my Scorpio moon and rising and Pluto on my ascendant. I'm going to do it on myself. Once I have an understanding of my expectations going into it, just because this year is an interesting year for my particular health experiences. So I'm just fascinated to see if
things are shifting.
Yeah. And just also to see if, like, it proves doctors wrong in certain ways.
That'd be cool.
Right? Because I've, too many doctors have given me too many limits. And I'm just like, let's find out. But also if it says 10, it'll just be as accurate because I did die when I was 10. Oh, so we'll see.
Well, that's interesting too.
There are certain ones that, again, expectations were lower back then.
Right.
So, like, some of the things are like, when you do this, you get 14 days and 5 hours. This person lived 14 days and 5 hours. Well, that's unfortunate. But, like, what about the people who made it past 8 years old? So, I am looking into that a little bit more. Mostly out of curiosity.
Did past 8. That's funny.
You have to wonder, right?
Yeah.
But in ancient astrology, it was fascinating because this was the first thing you were told to do because you didn't want to make promises to people if they weren't going to live long enough to have it. Right? So they viewed death differently back then.
No, they really did. I mean, writing Lacusta and, like, thinking about how death was viewed is very, very different experience.
Yeah, like if
very
you have a
different
really
experience.
good period when you're 36, but you don't make it past 26, and you just got this person all jazzed up, but they have a really horrible life up to that point, and you're like, but it's okay, it'll get better when you're 26, as you die as you're 26.
Right.
So,
Damn.
So that's something I'm exploring now that I've been in astrology for long enough to do it, but it used to be the first thing you learned.
How intriguing.
Yeah. Take that for what it's worth. Again, I've been doing this for a long, long, long time. And even me, with mediumship and all this other stuff, I'm finally getting to the point where I'm being drawn to do it. So yeah, that's something I'm exploring as well. I'm starting to learn ancient Greek in May so that I can be more, I can actually read the texts for what they were written in and understand them better. I'm very excited about that too. I plan on doing that with astrology texts and biblical ones.
That'll be super cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, what did I read this
a
month?
lot. I'm sorry.
No. That's fabulous. I love it. I'm so stoked on it. I was just like, what did I read? Okay. The second day of this month I finished Emily Wilde's. So that was like, I've been on a roll this year with my books. It's been great.
I read more books I bought a Kindle.
Yeah.
I think that made a huge difference.
I love my Kindle. But what I will say is, like, the books I have been reading have all been good. Like, I've been stoked on them. Not all of them have been 5 stars, but at least 4 stars, which is...
We are coming into April.
Don't do that to me. It's going to be fabulous.
April is the month that Emily typically, for some reason, DNFs a lot of books.
It is! I DNF so many books in April. I think it's because my worldview is always shifting in April, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, these books suck, and they don't compliment me. Hopefully that's not the case. Right. Okay, so then I dove into Vespertine. Now, the reason I dove into Vespertine, it's written by the same person, Margaret Rogerson, who wrote Sorcery of Thorns. And I really liked Sorcery of Thorns, and I really like the novella that goes along with it. It feels like it's really nice. But I wasn't necessarily planning on reading Vespertine. I hadn't read a lot about it, but the cover wasn't something that was like, I want to read that, But someone... described it on TikTok. I forget who it was. And they're like, hey, this book I love because it's about an autistic ace person who hates people but has a ghost stuck in their head. And I was like, yes, I must read it now. Now here we are.
And now I know why we're friends.
I know. I love you. But I was like, okay, when I tell you, if you want to know what it's like between me and my spirit guides and the relationship we have, read that book. If you are a recovering Catholic, Christian, if you're deciding what parts that you want to take with you, what parts you don't want to take with you, read that book. It is a beautiful world that is crafted both in compliment and with valid criticism of organized religion. It's not our religion. It's not our planetary religion at all. It's the main character is a nun, but not in the way we would think of a nun. And basically something happened a long time ago that makes when you die, your spirit walks the earth afterwards and it attacks people. But there's different levels based on how you died, basically. So like if you died in a really, really horrible way, then it creates this type of spirit and that has to be battled in this way. And the nuns and the clergy are the people that battle the spirits.
Yeah. Sounds a little bit like Lockwood & Co.
It's a little bit like that. From what I know, I haven't actually read it, but like from the description. But it's so good. It's found family. It's so good. It's so good. I ate it up. I love it with such a deep passion. The Revenant that's stuck in her head is just the best. I love The Revenant. The Revenant is non-binary. completely. At one point, the main character asked the Revenant, like, are you a girl? Are you a boy? And the Revenant was just like, what the fuck does that even matter? Like, that's not even a thing. I don't even know why you're talking about that. And it's really funny. It's a really, really good book. I really loved it. It was fabulous. So that was probably the highlight of my reading. And then I read Margaret Rogerson's other book. I will say Vespertine is going to be a series, but it doesn't need to be. It could be a standalone. You'd be totally content. Going to be a series. Also, fun fact, no love interest, which I love. I love romantic books. I do. I really do. But no, sometimes you don't need one. And this doesn't have a love interest at all, which is fabulous. But the other book I read is actually her first book. It's called An Enchantment of Ravens. And it is about fairies. And it was written, I think, in like 2016, 2017. So kind of at the peak of like fairy fantasy coming out. I will say, though, very not super accurate. Like there's elements of what are in that book where I'm like, that's not particularly accurate. It is a romance love story sort of thing, predominantly, but the main character is an artist, and in the world that they're in, the fairy folk can't do any craft at all. Like they cannot do any sort of human craft. If they do, they die basically. So they can't cook food, they can't paint, they can't write, they can't nothing. They can't make music. No craft. So they're obsessed with human craft, so they go to the human lands and pay in enchantments for human craft.
That's really cool.
So she's like the best portrait artist, basically, that's happened in a generation. So she gets to deal with like a lot of these very intense fairy beings that come to get their portraits done. But they can't experience human emotion. And then one day she accidentally paints human emotion on one of their faces, and it's about all the shit that ensues after that. Like all of the intensity and like crazy experience that happens because the portrait isn't well received because they've never seen human emotion on one of their fairy faces. And
that sounds amazing.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. That sounds like I'm already feeling that's very channeled.
It's very channeled.
Yeah.
It's very channeled. There is seasonal courts. So there's the autumn court, the spring court, whatever. But it is more true. Like when I first started reading this, I was like, oh no, is this going to be like a knockoff, like a Court of Thorns and Roses sort of?
Yeah.
Like, oh no, it's not. It's really, there's fairy beasts, there's corruption, there's a king, and then the prince. It's like it's a whole thing. So it was really good. I will say I would have liked it to be longer. Kind of the same Sorcery of Thorns criticism. I would have liked it to be longer. And I think if it would have been longer, there would have been some questions that got answered that I really would have liked to have answered. That being said, though, I really appreciate the dynamic between the characters in the book.
Cool.
She has these two adopted siblings that were used to be goats, but the fairies turned them into kids. And so they're two twins. Exactly. So there's her two twin little sisters used to be goats. So they spend a lot of the book like accidentally eating something they're not supposed to eat, or
That's
like
phenomenal.
headbutting each other like out of nowhere. Like just, it's really cute.
That's phenomenal. I love that. I'm definitely going to read it now. You sold me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And then I also I just started reading A Far Wilder Magic, which I'm excited to tell you about. I don't know enough about it that I don't even want to hint at what it's about yet because I feel like I'm not going to do it justice. So
Next.
We'll see. It is April. Hopefully I finish it.
Yeah.
It comes highly recommended, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I also can already tell it's a book about mommy issues. I don't really have mommy issues, so we'll see how that goes. That's what I kind of read this month. Yeah, a lot of it was. I also reread a bunch of like my Rome, Day in the Life of Ancient Rome stuff because I was in Rome, so that's important to me.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so there we go. I feel like it's important, and I don't know what's going to happen in the days between us recording this and us releasing this, because we're recording this a little early because I happen to be here. So it's currently Friday. You will be getting this on Wednesday, but I feel like it's important for us to say something about YouTube.
Yeah. So both of us have our own YouTubes now on top of the podcast YouTube.
If you are watching this on the podcast YouTube, you can actually go to the account that we have, our channel, and our YouTubes are linked, so you'll be able to find it and just subscribe super easily there. Also, recommended people that we also love are on our channel as well.
Yeah.
Since it's going to be a world of figuring that kind of stuff out, I figure it's helpful to recommend that.
Yeah.
Also, for the full moon coming up on the 6th, I will be doing a live with Rebecca the Ghost Guide on her channel to talk more about using the moon, eclipses, all that kind of stuff. So that's my full moon live this month will be done with Rebecca on her channel. We'll be doing like a co-live thing.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
I'll be doing one as well. I think it's on the 20th. I haven't really decided, but I don't know what we're going to talk about. But I'm also going to be doing one with Rebecca the Ghost Guide. And yeah, we're just getting our channel started. Basically, at least on my channel, doing 3 facets. High vibe book stuff. We're talking about what makes a book high vibe. If a book is high vibe, do I recommend it on a spiritual level? Channeled history stuff. Lots of that content coming, especially with the travel that I've been doing this year. Lots of at location content with that as well, and then just spiritual stuff as well, basics and such.
My monthly astrology is going to be there, my planetary skits, and things are going to be on the YouTube shorts. Currently, monthly astrology is up. I will let you know, you can tell in this video that I'm trying to feel out the best format that I want to do for it. I'm going to keep horoscopes and stuff like that. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to serve the general transits of each month.
Yeah, fair.
But it is up. It is there. You can still get the PowerPoint for the month. This one's really funny because somehow I missed a lot of typos in the presentation. So you'll be able to watch and laugh along with me as that happens. Anybody who's any feedback you have, I'm open to it because I am trying to structure it a little bit better. So astrology, of course, will be ending up on my channel. There will be more, I think, about folk magic, academic approaches to magic and astrology and esoteric art. And probably, since I'm actually finding more time to read, maybe some stuff about stories as well and writing. Again, if there's more you want to hear from me, let me know. I'm very open to ideas on what you'd like to see on these channels. But that's where it is right now. You can always, of course, find astrology there because that's my language. So
also, if you just want to look up the YouTubes, if you're not watching this, if you're just listening to it, mine's the same handle. So at Her Words. And I threw a KristaLyn. So that's how you can find us on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our patrons for voting on this episode. We really wanted to do it. So we're so excited.
We do leave it up to you guys, and we will make sure that this always serves you and not our egos. But this one was both. So yeah,
we were really thrilled about it. We were like, fairies. And fairies got voted on. Also, just as a reminder, we do a bonus video every month in the Patreon. We also do, you can ask us questions. We will answer those at the end of episodes. There's a lot of fun content in that space. You get the episodes early, all sorts of fun stuff. So if you want to check that out, we have a lot of tiers and a lot of fun stuff in that zone. So head over to Patreon. This is going to be a year of a lot of announcements from us also. So Egypt is our first one. There are more coming. 7-ish. A lot more. We're doing a lot of stuff. Also, just important to note, as of this being posted, I'm pretty sure pitches will be open really soon. For the Forgotten Storytellers by next week. When you're listening to this, by next week they'll be open. So get your pitch handled if you want to join the next cohort. We're actually here doing our retreat in Tahoe for this cohort that we're currently doing. We would love to have you join our summer cohort. Lots of really fun energy. We're really excited about it. So definitely submit your pitches. Get ready to do that. They will open very soon.
It's super easy. We actually just have a form that you fill out, so you don't have to worry about am I structuring it well? Is there a good enough hook? We've got you covered. We just make it so easy. So you can grab that in the links in any of our bios and
it's just
your pitch.
ForgottenStorytellers.com. That's where you can find it to pitch.
That's true.
And with that too, you don't even have to have a full baked idea. We help you. So if you're just I really want to write a book about this, I know there's some sort of idea here.
Fiction book, unfinished, ready to channel in its full potential and help heal people.
You write the whole first draft, which is not the concrete book that everyone will see, but the first draft you write in 4 months with us. And it's really channeled and it's really activated. So all the books that we talked about today, we intentionally make sure that your book turns out like those books. As impactful. So that's the whole idea. Anyway, this is a long episode because we really want to talk about fairies, but we're going to try to get the tagline at the same time because we're in the same room. So are you ready? We hope that you... 1, 2, 3, go make some magic. That's how it's supposed to sound for the
Power
record.
pose.